It's time to begin our Bible class. We have a few still coming in. We want to express our sympathy to Rita and her family in the death of Cookie. Passed away the 23rd today. I was thinking it was yesterday. She's Rita's sister. Arrangements are unknown at this time, but will be shared in the near future. Virginia Dollar's son, Ronnie Dale Huisman, has been diagnosed with cancer. There are some events on your handout sheet. Get that. On your nursing home, in the nursing home section, Uncle Jerry Carmichael, has been moved out into Windsor, out of the rehab, and he's in room 16. Oh, louder. Louder, boys. I don't see any boys. Oh, yeah, there's one. That may be the problem. A little bit louder. Is that better? No? Yeah, I think so. Is it on now? Any better? Any different? Well, it says on, and it's got plenty of battery. It's not on mute. Now? Hello, hello, hello. Like that all night. I'm not going. Oh, there. Yeah. Well, when I have car trouble, my mechanic always says it's a loose nut behind the wheel. I don't know what he means by that, but Gene knows what he means. Okay. In loving memory, Etta Cookie Dudgeon passed away. She's Rita's sister. Ronnie Dale Huisman, Virginia Dollar's son, has cancer. Uncle Jerry Carmichael has been moved from room 56 to room 16 in Windsor Care. Anything else that we need to mention before we begin, Nancy? Jim's brother is having heart. Bobby Brown. Bobby Brown is having heart trouble. Keep him in your prayers. I had my checkup with my heart and lung specialist yesterday, and he said my heart is completely back to normal size, normal function, and so that's good news. They still won't let me fix my knee until April, but because I need the blood thinner. But other than that, I'm doing really well. I appreciate your prayers. Okay, anything else? All right, let's start with a prayer. Father, we bow before you at the end of this wonderful day you've given us. We thank you for this day. We thank you for this group that's gathered here. We thank you for the great privilege and honor to study your word. We pray your blessings upon our study this evening, your blessings upon these that have been mentioned as having lost loved ones and as being those who are sick and in the nursing home. Continue to be with them. Continue to be with our relatives who are struggling with their health, and continue to help us here with this church as we try to move forward in a new year. Be with Clay and his family as they join our staff here and begin to work with us. Help it to be a productive gathering and productive relationship. And we thank you for Jesus. In his name we pray. Amen. All right. Joshua, Judges, and Ruth tonight. And really meaty, interesting things in these three books. Probably some of your most familiar stories or accounts will be found in these books. In the book of Joshua, of course, you have the walls of Jericho falling down. You have, in the book of Judges, you have Samson and Delilah, that story you hear over and over again, and many others. I like Ehud, the left-handed judge who stabbed the big fat guy. That's a good Judges story. And then the book of Ruth. What a beautiful love story the book of Ruth is, and she ends up in the genealogy of Jesus. After 40 years of wandering, Joshua leads the Israelites across the Jordan and begins the long process of possessing the promised land. Their first camp on the west side of the Jordan is at Gilgal, and their first victory is Jericho. They were camped at Shittim on the east side, and 3 tribes settled on the east side. They liked where they were, and they stayed there. Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh. Those 3 tribes settled land on the east side of the Jordan. But what was the conditions? Remember the conditions that they could settle on that side?
They had to cross over first.
The men of war had to cross over and help take the other side. Then they could go back and settle in their land. The book entitled Joshua is an Old Testament book that describes the conquest and division of the land of Canaan. If you look in Deuteronomy 34, you'll see at the very first verse says, Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo to the top of Pisgah, which is across from Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land of Gilead as far as Dan and Naphtali and the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea. He also showed him the south and the plain and the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. And the Lord said to him, This is the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have caused you to see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there. Do you remember why?
Because he hit the rock.
He disobeyed God. He struck the rock instead of speaking to the rock. He let the people get to it. They used to tell us in preaching school, don't let the people get to you. Don't behave in a way that you would not ordinarily behave just because the people are putting pressure on you. And there has been many times that I didn't do that well. I have let the people get to me from time to time, but not very often, because I developed this ability to say, I'm not ready to talk about that yet. Give me a little bit. And walk away. And walk away and think about it for a while. I never regret doing that. And I'm sure Moses regretted not gathering himself and striking that rock, because he didn't get to go into the land. Verse 5, Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord, and he, the Lord, buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor, but no one knows his grave to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not dim, nor his natural vigor diminished. He didn't die because he was sick. He died because it was time for him to go. God wanted him to go. And why didn't they advertise where he was buried? What? They didn't want people to know. Why not? It would have been a shrine, wouldn't it? He was an amazing leader. They would have probably made it into a shrine and worshiped his stone or whatever, so it's best not to know where he is. And we could talk about that a long time, but we don't have a long time. So then, chapter 34 continues to say in verse 8, the children of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. So the days of weeping and mourning for Moses ended, and Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, and Moses had laid his hands on him. So the children of Israel heeded him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. But since then there has not arisen in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. And all the signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt before Pharaoh, before all his servants, and in all his land, and by the mighty power and all the great terror which Moses performed in the sight of Israel. Joshua 1, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving them, the children of Israel. Every place the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, as I said to Moses. And so Joshua takes over at the very first of his book and replaces Moses as the leader of the Israelites. The book has a natural flowing structure. It's a joy to read and to study. In brief prologue, the warrior Joshua is introduced as a capable leader. God trusts him. God knows he's going to be able to do this job. His strategy is to divide and conquer. He strikes first in the middle of the country and middle of Canaan by taking the city of Jericho and surrounding territory. Then he launches rapid attacks to the south and the north, and that strategy quickly gave the covenant people a foothold in the land. One of the first things that we encounter is him preparing them spiritually and getting them ready. And let's talk a little bit about the man Joshua himself. He was born in Egypt. He went through the great events of the Exodus with Moses and the Hebrew people. In the wilderness of Sinai, he was on the mountain with Moses. If you remember when in the golden calf incident, it was Joshua who heard the noise down at the bottom of the mountain, and it sounded like some sort of celebration. He was there up on the mountain. Now, was he right there when the Ten Commandments were given? We don't know. But he was Moses' assistant. When Moses sent out spies to scout out the land in Numbers 13, Joshua was the representative of Ephraim, and the tribe of Ephraim. Only Joshua and Caleb returned with a good report that they could conquer the land, and so they were the two over 20 years old that were allowed to go into the land. All the rest of the men that age and over died because they died in the wilderness because they had given bad reports and had wanted to stone Joshua and Caleb and elect another leader and go back. And so God took care of them. He led the Israelites to conquer the land. He supervised the division of the territory in the land of Canaan among the 12 tribes. He led the people to renew their covenant with God in Joshua 13. He goes back all the way through chapter 22. He goes back over the covenant that God had made. When he died at age 110, he was buried in the land of his inheritance. And as Moses' successor, he completed the work Moses had done. Moses led them out of Egypt. Joshua led them across the Jordan and into Canaan. His name in the Old Testament is a form of Jesus, which means the Lord is salvation. And so just a few things about Joshua himself. We'll kind of go through this outline that you have on your screen in Joshua. First of all, he replaces Moses and gets instructions. I wonder why that's smaller. In the way he prepared Israel, in chapter 5, there were a bunch of men, 20 and over, who had been wandering in the wilderness, who were born in the wilderness, and they had not been circumcised. And so the first thing he did was circumcise all the men of that age, of the men of war, preparing to go and take the land of the city of Jericho. Another thing that happened is he sent spies in chapter 2 into Jericho, and that's where we meet Rahab the harlot in chapter 2. She was living in a house on the wall of Jericho, and she welcomed the spies in and hid them and sent them on their way, and she made a deal with them. You remember what the deal was?
Yeah, that her and her family would be, when they came, would be protected.
She showed
Give
some.
her cord.
She showed faith, didn't she? Yeah.
She showed
Put a scarlet cord outside, and we'll know which house not to attack. And you and your family all come out, and we'll save the whole bunch. And she ends up, Matthew chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, she ends up in the genealogy of Jesus, which is interesting. There are Gentiles in the genealogy of Jesus, by the way. Ruth later on, and Rahab here. And so when they came to attack Jericho, and you remember the unusual way they were to do it, they were to march around one time every day for 6 days, and then 7 times on the 7th day, and shout and blow their trumpet and scream, and the walls would fall down. I had a schematic of the walls, what they looked like, and it didn't make it in this presentation for some way. I'm not sure why. But there was a grassy embankment of a couple of 100 feet, and then there was a huge wall, and then several hundred more feet of embankment, and another huge wall in order to get in. And there were buildings in between those two walls, places for people to live and to guard the walls. And so it was impenetrable. It was thought to have been militarily impenetrable, Jericho. And yet, they marched around it and shouted, and the walls fell down. And they went in and took it. Is that how you destroy a wall? If you were to draw up a blueprint to make a huge retaining wall, guarding wall fall down, would it? You just get everybody you know together and say, let's walk around and yell real loud. That's right. And why did it fall down? God did it. God did it. Why was Naaman cleansed of leprosy after dipping in the Jordan 7 times? God did it. So it was a miracle. There's a place in the book of Judges where the sun stood still for one whole day. Scientists and astronomers, astrologers, or whatever have tried to explain that. God did it. People used to argue with me all the time. This lady down in Goodlettsville wanted me to explain exactly the role that angels have in our lives now. Exactly what do angels do in our lives now? And I said, they do whatever God tells them to do. I don't know what they do. But I attribute all that stuff to God. If He wants to use an angel to do it, fine. If He wants to use a poor beggar with dogs licking his sores to teach a lesson, that's His business. He can do whatever He wishes to do. And so Rahab the harlot and all of her family were saved when they finally did attack Jericho and walk around, and the walls fell down. And so He prepared them militarily. He prepared them spiritually. All the men were circumcised. And at the end of chapter 5, verses 13 through 15, we could have a long discussion about who this is. Somebody called the commander of the Lord appears. It came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" And he said, "No, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have come now." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped and said to him, "What does my Lord say to his servant?" And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Take your sandal off your foot, for the place where you stand is holy." And Joshua did so. There's a lot of controversy about who this is. Most scholars think this is the pre-incarnate Christ, the part of the Godhead that eventually comes to be known as God the Son. They also, some scholars think, that when you see the capital title, the angel of the Lord, in the Old Testament, that's the same one. He was active. We know he was active in the Old Testament because the New Testament says he was in the pillar of cloud helping to lead them, and the pillar of fire, and nothing was created that wasn't created through the Word, and so perhaps that's who this commander of the Lord is. And he appears. Now, why would he appear just before you take the first city of the end of the 40-year wandering? Did they need some confidence? Need some faith? Some encouragement? Likely. Need to know the Lord's there. The Lord's involved in this. So they crossed the Jordan River on dry land. The Jordan is stopped at the north and held up. Now, it doesn't say it was congealed. The Red Sea, it says that it was congealed, but I don't know how the other one was, what consistency it was. But they walked on dry land. They gathered 12 stones from the middle of the river and set up a memorial. And it specifically said the reason they did that is when their children ask, what do these stones mean? They get to tell them a history lesson. They get to give them a history lesson about coming out of the land of Egypt and all those plagues and all those things. I remember loving to walk over familiar territory with my granddad, and he loved to say, now that used to be whatever, or there used to be, and I remember when that was, and now I do that to my grandkids and they glaze over. They're not interested at all. But I was interested in it. I could try to imagine. There was the farm we lived on outside View had a stone wall around an old graveyard, and the wall was falling down. And I would say, who's buried in there? Well, he would tell me who they were and what their history was and how they ended up there and why they were buried there on that particular place and all that. But anyway, what do these stones mean? And then he would get to tell them their history lesson. They start out in central Canaan. Jericho was the city of palms. It is one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world. And there are still people living in that area. And it was a sort of an oasis, sort of a gathering place at the foot of the mountains that led up toward Judea. And you remember it played prominently in the Gospels, didn't it? Jericho. What are some of the things you remember about Jericho in the Gospels? You remember Zacchaeus? That happened at Jericho. The Good Samaritan was on the road between Jerusalem and Jericho, where he had fallen into the hands of thieves. And so Jericho plays a prominent role in the Gospels. Let's see. I don't think I have the right paper. Hang on. Yes. In chapter 7, we have the sin of Achan. What was the sin of Achan? When I say his name, what comes up?
He took spoils of war.
He took the spoils of war
Drove
from Jericho and
buried them in his tent.
buried them in his tent. And what was the instruction? All the valuable stuff goes to the temple of the Lord. Goes to the house of the Lord. You don't keep any of it. And he kept some of it. He was greedy. It was shiny. He wanted it. And he and all of his household were stoned, burned, and stoned because they disobeyed. And they brought sin in the camp, and they caused a military disaster. When they tried to go up to take Ai, the second city, which would have been given to them, it was so small and so weak, they didn't even send all their soldiers up there. They just sent a few of them. And they ended up being defeated because, I love this line, and I've used this line in the church a lot. There's sin in the camp. When there's sin in the camp, the apple has a little rotten place in it. It's just a matter of time before it ruins the whole barrel. And so if it's not called into check. And so God took care of it by having them stoned to death and burned and stoned in a heap of stones piled up over top of them. Then in chapter 8, when they go back to fight Ai, they're successful because they've taken care of the sin in the camp. In chapter 9, we have an interesting, the Gibeonites who are located, let me find my map. Well, I'm sure there's a map, yeah. If you can see that, you see Jericho, keep looking to the west, you see Ai and Bethel, right below them is Gibeon. The Gibeonites were going to be right in the middle of all this. And so you remember what they did? They were very clever. They put old saddles and old rags on their animals. They dressed in rags. They used old patched up wineskins to make it, and they packed their lunches with moldy bread, dry moldy bread, and their shoes were worn out and patched because they wanted it to look as if they had come from a far country. Had they said, we're going to be your neighbors, they probably would have been destroyed right then and there. But they they convinced the rulers, the leaders, that they had come from a long ways, and they said, we've heard about you people. What you did to Og and all those big kingdoms, and we want to make a treaty with you that you won't destroy us, we won't bother you, and you don't bother us. And we'll work for you, we'll serve you, we'll do whatever you want. And so they did. They made a treaty with them. They convinced them that they were from afar off, only to find out they're right in the middle of the whole mess. And when they did find out, they stayed true to their word. They said, well, we already made a treaty with them. So they became the woodcutters and the water carriers.
That's what the Lord done for them.
Yeah.
But when you see that, and you see the deceit they use, now that's important to me because deceit it's the worst thing alive to me.
Yeah.
And deceit is a long reaching thing for you. So always shy away from deceit.
Yeah, you can be taken in by it, and they were, and they had to honor it. And but they did get a whole tribe of woodcutters and water carriers out of it. But they were supposed to have destroyed all those people, and the Gibeonites' trickery helped them to avoid that. Chapter 10, verses 1 through 28 is where the sun stood still. They were fighting a battle, and they needed more daylight, and God gave it to them. I don't know how to explain it other than to say that. God did it. And so, and I've heard people try to go back in what is the word? Is it astrology or astronomy? I always get those two mixed up. But anyway, they go back and they try to figure out, oh yeah, there was a time, and none of that can be proved. The fact is, the Bible says it happened. I believe it happened. I don't know how it happened except to say God did it. It was a miracle. Miracles supersede the natural, and that's what happened. And so the sun stood still long enough for them to win the battle. Then they defeated cities in the south in chapter 10, 29 and following, talks about all those cities. The northern kingdoms were defeated. There's a list of kings whom the kings tried to bind together. 5 of them got together and tried to fight them together. A bunch of them hid in a cave. That didn't work. They just put stones in front of the cave where they couldn't get out. That was a simple solution to that. And so no matter what strategy they tried, they couldn't win because God was going to do it. They were going to win. The Israelites were. And so Joshua 12 lists the kings that were defeated. In Joshua 13, they divide the land, and then there's some land still to be taken yet. 14 is very interesting. You remember Caleb, Joshua's friend, who also brought back a good report and was promised land in the new place. And I want us to read about Caleb in chapter 14, beginning with verse 6. The children of Judah came to Joshua in Gilgal, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know the word which the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, concerning you and me in Kadesh Barnea? I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh to spy out the land, and I brought back word to him as it was in my heart." This is Caleb. "Nevertheless, my brethren who went up with me made the heart of the people melt, but I wholly followed the Lord my God." And then verse 9, "So Moses swore on that day, saying, Surely the land where your foot has trodden shall be your inheritance, and your children's forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God. And now behold, the Lord has kept me alive, as he said, these 45 years, ever since the Lord spoke this word to Moses while Israel wandered in the wilderness. And now here I am, this day, 85 years old." My page is stuck together. Hang on. "As yet," he said, "I'm 85 years old." Verse 11. "As yet I am as strong this day as on the day Moses sent me. Just as my strength was then, so now my strength is for war, both for going out and coming in. Therefore, give me this mountain." What a man. I'm 85 years old and I'm just as strong as I was when I was 40. And I want to take the mountain. And the reason nobody wanted the mountain, the reason he wanted it, the giants lived there. A race of big, war-trained people. The Anakim were there. And the cities were great and fortified. "It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall be able to drive them out, as the Lord said." And Joshua blessed him and gave Hebron to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and as an inheritance. Hebron therefore became the inheritance of Caleb to this day. When Joshua was writing this, he wholly followed the Lord God of Israel. And the name of Hebron formerly was Kiriath Arba. Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim. Then the land had rest from war. Caleb is a great example. I don't know how many times I have preached lessons on "Give me this mountain." We need to have that attitude. "Lord, I'm small. I don't speak well. I'm weak. I'm this. I'm that. But I know with you I can take this mountain." And whatever it is, the mountain of evangelism, the mountain of speaking to my neighbors about Jesus, the mountain of church unity, the mountain of church growth, the mountain of personal spiritual purity. Whatever my mountain is, with God I can take it. What a great example Caleb is of "Give me this mountain." You want to talk? You don't talk much.
Don't never doubt God.
Don't ever doubt God.
Never doubt Him.
Caleb didn't doubt it. Then they start splitting up the tribes. Land for the I had to go back and find my map. The settlement east of the Jordan, we talked about that. Their tribal boundaries west of the Jordan. The first settlements at Gilgal, the second at Shiloh. Cities of refuge in chapter 20. Cities of refuge were places where if you accidentally killed somebody, or if you killed somebody, whether it was an accident or pre-planned or whatever, the next of kin had the right to avenge his dead relative. Genesis chapter 9 says if you take somebody's life, your life will be taken. But what if it was an accident? Well, if his relative finds you, he could kill you. So there were 6 strategically placed cities of refuge where you could run and you could be safe there as long as you stayed in that city until the high priest changed. Then you were free to go In the meantime, your trial and all that would be settled. If you were found guilty of murder, you would be punished. But if it was an accident, you would get to stay there or go free after they changed high priest. But it was a place to keep you from being punished and being killed. Now, if you wandered out of that city, the next of kin could find you and kill you without retribution.
The law was eye for an eye, tooth for tooth.
Yeah.
That's what the law was.
Yeah. If you killed a relative, well, especially murder, Genesis 9, it was before there was a law of Moses. There's a law of nature that if you take a life, you exchange your life for that life. And then the Levites didn't get an inheritance like everybody else. They would get a city and land around that city enough for their flocks or herds, but they were the priestly tribe. And so God took care of them. I've heard it compared to preachers living in preacher housing. The church would take care of a place for them to live. It's not recommended that you do that now. I've tried not to do it. I've done it a time or two. Live in a church-owned home. The problem with that is you don't build any equity. And you can be 70 years old and retired and not have anywhere to live. And I have known, I don't think this congregation would ever do that, but I have known churches who, after the preacher died, they would give his widow 30 days to find a place to go. I have known churches that when the preacher's usefulness was, if he was no longer useful or no longer effective, they would put him out, not caring where he went or how he lived. I've known that to happen. I don't think that would ever happen here, but I have known it to happen. And so to buy his own house is a good idea. And the elders here understand that. They helped Danny and me both get houses at good prices and so that we would have places to live. The settlement of Israel was completed in the sense that, now when you get to Judges, you're going to find some land that hadn't been settled yet. But it was completed in the sense that God gave it all to them. They just had to go take it. And they didn't necessarily do all that yet. But look at chapter 21, and near the end, verse 43. The Lord gave to Israel all the land of which he had sworn to give their fathers. They took possession of it and dwelt in it. The Lord gave them rest all around according to all that he had sworn to their fathers, and not a man of all their enemies stood against them. The Lord delivered all their enemies into their hand. Not a word failed of any good thing which the Lord had spoken to the house of Israel. All came to pass. And then in Joshua's probably most famous speech, we got to hurry and get on to the Judges and Ruth, but in Joshua's most famous speech, his farewell speech, in chapter 24 and verse 15, he tells the people, if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now dwell. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And the people answered and said, far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord and serve other gods. And then when we get into the book of Judges, you see they do that very thing. The book of Judges, the key phrase is found in chapter 5 and verse 7, is it? Let me make sure memory serves me right. No, it's not 5:7. It's 7. Well, just a minute, I'll find it. But the key phrase in the book of Joshua is, there was no king in the land, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. If that's not a recipe for disaster, I don't know what is. Every man does what's right in his own eyes. The problem with that is now in our culture, we are inundated with relativism. What's right in your eyes may be wrong in my eyes, and what's right in my eyes may be wrong in your eyes. And so what a mess that is, when every man does what's right in his own eyes. In chapter 1, we see that Israel, there's a list of the accomplishments, military accomplishments of Joshua. And then we learn that Joshua dies, and all the elders that knew him died, and a new generation arises, and they like where they live, and they don't help each other continue to conquer the land, continue to drive everybody out, and that is a problem for them. God's judgment for them is to plague them with the various nations that are around them, and just as he said they would, and they'll end up worshiping their gods. Then you have a list of the judges, starting with chapter 3 and verse 5, and each judge's story is told. Let me get my notes straight here. The judges is a period, there's a cycle. They worship God faithfully for a while, and then they become unfaithful. They become rich, lazy, unfaithful. They worship other gods. They become morally depraved, and God allows them to be oppressed by a neighboring nation, sometimes taken captivity. Neighboring kings will come in and take over God's land that He had given them. And then they cry out, just as they did in the land of Egypt, they cry out to God, and He sends a deliverer, a judge, they're called. Othniel is the first one. Ehud, as I said, is an interesting one in chapter 3 and verse 12. The children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. You keep seeing that in the book of Judges. The children of Israel served Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. 18 years they were oppressed. But when the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, He raised up a deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera, the Benjaminite, a left-handed man. By him the children of Israel sent tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. He's taking the taxes, the tribute, to Eglon, the king. And you got to hear this. Ehud made himself a dagger. It was double-edged and a cubit in length, 18 inches, and fastened it under his clothes on his right thigh. So he brought the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now Eglon was a very fat man, verse 17 says. And when he had finished presenting the tribute, he sent away the people who had carried the tribute. But he himself, Ehud, turned back from the stone images that were at Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And he said, keep silence. And all who attended him went out. So Ehud came to him. He was sitting upstairs in his cool private chamber. Now I'm going to be as tactful as I know how. He was in the bathroom, in his cool private chamber on the roof. Ehud said, I have a message of God for you. So he arose from his seat. Ehud reached with his left hand, took the dagger from his right thigh, thrust it into his belly, and the hilt went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not draw the dagger out of his belly, and his entrails came out. Hey, I didn't write it. Ehud went out through the porch and shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. Now, what a great strategy. All of the attendants think the king is using the bathroom. And so they're not going to bother him. So he kills him. He slips out through the porch and leaves, and he's got a big head start, and they keep waiting. Is he ever going to come out of there? How long is this going to take? And finally, they realize something's wrong and break in the door and find him laying on the floor dead. Well, Ehud's long gone by now. And he gets out and gathers up the children of Israel and says, King Eglon's dead, and we're going to go back and take them back. And so that was one interesting thing. Deborah is another interesting one. Deborah was a lady judge. And she sings a victory song in chapter 5. And in the song, she tells us why she was allowed to serve. Now, she had a male associate, Barak, that helped her, but she was the judge. And here's what she says in verse 6 of Judges 5. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were deserted. The travelers walked along the byways. It wasn't safe, in other words, to walk on the highway. Village life ceased. It ceased in Israel until I, Deborah, arose a mother in Israel. Deborah came because, what's it mean, village life ceased? Nobody'd run for mayor. Nobody would run for city council. Nobody would step up and take over. No men were doing their job, ladies, so Deborah had to step up and do it. I always envisioned Deborah as being about 6 feet tall and weighing about 300 pounds. I always figured she was a bruiser, boy. And I couldn't prove it if my life depended on it, but I think you don't want to mess with her. And she arose a mother, and she saw herself as a mother of Israel. And she led them back to the Lord through a difficult time, back to the Lord. The Canaanites were defeated. Deborah had this victory song. Then Gideon is another interesting one. Let's see, who have we missed? Oh, yeah, this guy. Probably know more about him than any of them. Why was he so strong? Not because he had long hair. Why was he so strong? God did it. God did it. But God put His strength in his hair. And boy, did he ever have woman trouble. He had lots of problems. He was a frivolous guy with, he used his power, he was immature. He used his power kind of as a joke to get things and all that, but when it came down to it, when he pushed the pillars down and destroyed the enemy and freed Israel from oppression, he was the hero. So Samson, probably the best known. There's a horrible example of immorality where a man cuts his concubine up in 12 pieces and sends a piece of her to each tribe saying, look how horrible we've gotten. The tribes start fighting against each other in the time of the judges. And then there is a beautiful love story that happens right in the middle of all this ugliness. Ruth, the Moabitess, goes to Naomi and her husband and 2 sons in time of famine, go down to Moab, and there her sons marry Gentile women. And the sons and the father all die, and one of the women went back to her, Orpah went back to her home. Ruth comes back with Naomi, winds up marrying Boaz, and a kinsman of Naomi, and ends up in the genealogy of Jesus. And you know the beautiful love story of Ruth. Okay, I know that was quick, but such is this class. Well, I lost everything. Questions or comments? I know you got some, but there are handouts, and you can do your own personal study. I would love to teach Joshua through Ruth in detail sometime, and maybe I will. But thank you for your comment, for your attention. And this class reminds me of a Revelation class I had in college. In college, one of my teachers read Revelation 20. He was in a hurry, and he didn't want to stay around. Revelation 20 is the most difficult chapter in the Bible. And he read it and closed it up and said, any questions? Yeah, we had questions. Thanks for your attention. Y'all come on in. I'm done.
doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I would have got that, son.
No, it's no worries.
But let me tell you something. You look good.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday night Rolling Hills Bible Study. The first song is "'Tis So Sweet to Trust in Jesus." "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus, just to take Him at His word, just to rest upon His promise, just to know thus saith the Lord. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust Him, how I proved Him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust Him more. Oh, how sweet to trust in Jesus, just to trust His cleansing blood, just in simple faith to plunge me 'neath the healing, cleansing flood. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust Him, how I proved Him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust Him more. Yes, 'tis sweet to trust in Jesus, just from sin and self to cease, just from Jesus simply taking life and rest and joy and peace. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust Him, how I proved Him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust Him more. I'm so glad I learned to trust Thee, precious Jesus, Savior, friend, and I know that Thou art with me, will be with me to the end. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust Him, how I prove Him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust Him more. The invitation song is "Why Keep Jesus Waiting."
Well, good evening. Let's see. For our devotional tonight, if you want to be marking them in your book, we're going to reference Matthew 13, verse 12, and 25, verse 29, as well as Luke 12, verse 48. I just turned 54 this past week. For some of you, looking back at it, that seems like that might be kind of young. But for others of you that are looking up toward it, I'm 1 year away from senior discounts. But, while you're in it, it tends to be a reflective age, right? You know, I've worked for 32 years. Frankly, I'm tired of it, but I'm still too young to retire. So, but I'm thinking more and more about what that's going to be like when I get there. And, you know, you've got to evaluate how far away you are, what your finances are going to look like, all of that. And, you know, like many, I'm paying a lot of attention to my 401k. And I'm actually pretty happy with it because the last couple of years, I think the average growth rate's been in the 16, 17% range. So, you know, not bad, but what does it mean? Well, for me, I made the decision about 20 years ago or so to invest pretty aggressively, to increase my investment every year, and to balance it, right? To pay attention to it so that it's aggressive, it's going to grow, but it's also got some level of security in case the market takes a dip, which it does from time to time. So I've invested like that to ensure a comfortable future for Bobby and I at the point that we do decide to retire, to ensure that we can have health care, to ensure that we can cover living expenses. You know, all the things that I don't really have to think about a whole lot when I'm working. But what does that 17-ish% ROI mean to someone that is not strategically investing? It really doesn't mean much, right? If it's someone that only adds a few dollars here and there, or whenever maybe they've got a little extra money or something reminds them they need to invest and oh yeah, well, let me put some more money in there. They really haven't built up enough to drive the effect of that compounding interest, right? You don't really get the gains. You don't get the increase, if you will, that comes from the time that we're experiencing now, right? The type of return that we're experiencing. You also don't have the protection. You're not focused on it. You're not balancing what you're doing. So if the market takes a dip, it can wipe away everything you've got. It can take away significantly what your gains have been. So I'll review all of this just to parallel the scripture that I referenced earlier. The statements that Jesus made when he's teaching parables of the sower and the talents. If we turn over to Matthew 13, verse 12, the parable of the sower, it says, For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. If you flip on over to Matthew 25, verse 29, in the parable of the talents, it says, For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. Now, if you turn over to Luke 12, it's a little different way of saying it. It drives more to accountability. It says, From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. Jesus is effectively saying that to those that have much, much will be given. In short, he is emphasizing that investing in your faithfulness by using your current blessings that you've been giving will lead to more faith, more blessing. Neglecting these blessings, neglecting to grow in his word, will result in loss. Loss of faith, loss of blessing, loss of eternal life. Luke 12:48 adds that to whom much is given, much will be required, highlighting the stewardship and responsibility for blessing, that protection, the strategic look at how you're using the blessings, the talents that God has given you, so that you don't lose. If you're not focused on investing in your knowledge of the Word, in the fruits of your faithful works, you will not grow in spirit. And you're at risk of losing even your salvation if temptation gets the better of you. Consider how you invest in your spiritual growth. Are you currently a Christian, but perhaps you haven't been as focused on how you're investing in your knowledge and the growth of your knowledge and in your faithful works for Christ? Perhaps you haven't yet begun your Christian walk and the path to spiritual growth, and you need to make that choice to truly hear God's word, to repent of your past sinful ways, to confess your belief in Jesus as the Son of God and the Christ, our Savior, and then to commit yourself in baptism that you may be cleansed of your sins and your spirit restored to God. From there, you set your mind on growing that investment that God has made in you. You understand your blessings and how you can use them for His purpose. If you have need tonight, won't you come forward now as we all stand and sing together?
Thank you all for coming this evening. Do you have announcements to make? Okay. He's got announcements.
Everyone knows Dan Murphy. He's been on this for, I don't know, 50 years or something like that. At least 50. Jerry's, I guess, a little over 9 now. So, it's a season of giving, of course, and we appreciate these two gentlemen so much for what they do here at Rolling Hills. They have the rare abilities to be able to enjoy each other's company, work together, and yes, they still do. Still like each other. That's right. They still like each other. Now, we try to enhance that relationship by leaving Dan upstairs and moving Jerry downstairs. That's helped a lot. But anyway, we really do appreciate them, and so at this time of year, giving, we always want to share a nice Christmas card, and just to show you how much we think of them and how equal they are in our sights. The Christmas cards are just exactly alike. One has Dan's name on it, that would be yours, and one has Jerry's name on it. Thank you. Appreciate it. You want to say anything? You're preaching, you better say it.
Thank you for letting me work here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Remember the 3 words. It's
how I feel toward this congregation as well as the Lord. In love, thankful, and beloved, and blessed. What's that? Okay, sorry. You're really beloved. I'm really beloved. Thank you all. For those who do not have a reading plan on your phone, you can either take a picture of one of these papers up here on this front pew. If you would like to use one of these, there's one that is yearly read the Bible through in a year. There's one that is a 30-day plan that you read from the words of Jesus. There's a 60-day reading plan from the letters of Paul. And then there's one that Brother Alton from Owensville did that you read through the New Testament twice in half a year. So anyway, he's got one of those plans. But if you would like one of those, they're free to take. Just to encourage you to have some sort of plan if you don't have one on your phone already. Okay.
If there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and close us out in a prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for letting us all come here together to learn about you. Lord, we thank you for Dan and Jerry for allowing them to minister to this congregation for as long as they have, and pray that you'll be with them throughout the rest of this year and into next year as whatever comes, and whatever happens. Lord, be with us at the rest of this night and as we go home and until we come here again on Sunday. And in Jesus' name I pray, amen.